Hey everyone, SweetJohnnyCage here. Today I want to talk to you guys about this whole vanilla server, private server, World of Warcraft deal. I know this is a little late, but I didn't actually feel compelled to do this video until I was recording the Dancing Troll Village video. And it turns out that I had been using Nostarius to record some vanilla videos. And when I went to log in, obviously it was down. So I had to go find another private server. And it turned out to be very challenging, so I was compelled to make this video. So I'm going to break this down into 7 points, or 7 discussion topics, and we're going to start off with my first experiences with vanilla World of Warcraft. So back in 2005, it was around Christmas time, 2005, I was at a Christmas party with some friends of high school, and they were talking about a video game. I didn't know what game they were talking about, but I overheard the conversation, and I went to school with gamers, you know what I mean? That's where the bulk of my friends were from. And went over, joined the conversation. Turns out they were talking about WoW. And at that point, WoW seemed a little strange to me. I had played Warcraft 3 at a friend's house a few times. I wasn't super into strategy games aside from Age of Empires, actually. That's just because I'm a history buff. But and when I first heard about WoW, I heard about the subscription model. And that felt very strange to me. I didn't like that idea at the time. And honestly, aside from like Final Fantasy 11, like a couple of other MMOs, I guess, no one was really doing that. And $15 a month for a high schooler, you're a senior in high school, that's a lot of money. You're only taking in like $100, $120 a week from your part-time job at a grocery store like I was. And it adds up. That's a lot of money, with all, your cell phone bill and stuff. But they gave me like a compelling argument. They made the game sound really fantastic. So I bought it. And I went to the bank with my dad to open up my first checking account to get my first debit card to pay for the subscription. And I didn't know they had prepaid time cards at the time. So, yeah, that's what I did. I got my first debit card and signed up. And I remember rolling on a server. I don't remember the name of it, but I rolled a Night Elf Druid. And the reason I rolled on this particular server was because another friend of mine, it wasn't one of those friends at a party, but another friend of mine told me, roll on this server and I'll play with you. I have a high-level character, and, we'll play. I'll show you around. I played for weeks, and I never heard from the kid. I didn't even know his in-game name. I finally got it, and, this was a close friend of mine. And turns out that he was, questing over in Burning Steps, and he was like, no, I'm too high level, I can't come play with you. And back then, it wasn't so easy to just roll a new character because they took a long time to level. Leveling to 60 took a few months, it wasn't like a week or two as it is now. I was playing a Night Elf Druid, and Druids, as we all know, are an amalgamation of a lot of other classes, and my Druid now is actually named Amalgam for that reason. So I was trying to learn this class when I had no MMO experience, barely any RPG experience outside of, like Final Fantasy or Diablo even, stuff like that. So it was pretty daunting, and I was playing alone, and my whole experience at that time was just Night Elves. I knew about humans, I knew about dwarves, but I had never seen them. I was questing in places like Teldrassil, Darkshore, Moonglade, Ashenvale, these fairly low-level elf places. So the whole color scheme of the game to me was green, blue, gray, and purple. I didn't know of anything else, so when I was level 15 or 16, whatever it was, I got the quest to get the Druid C form. And the first part of the quest had you do something at the bottom of Lake Elune in Moonglade, and then they told you to go to this place called Westfall. And I had no idea what Westfall was. So I go back to Darkshore, and I started asking in general chat, how do I get to Westfall? Somebody tells me you have to take a boat to the other continent. And I'm like, the other continent? What the hell are you talking about? So sure enough, I open up the map, and I click out a couple times, and I see that the world is twice the size than I thought it was. So I eventually find a boat to Menethil Harbor, get off the boat, and I'll never forget this. This was the first time that I saw the sun in World of Warcraft. Up until that point, I'd only been questing in Night Elf zones. I had no idea that there was a regular-looking sun in the game. So then I ask again in general chat, now in Wetlands, how do I get to Westfall? And they say, you gotta walk to Ironforge. Okay, where the hell's that? So they say, just follow the road, you gotta go through Loch Modan, then Dunmorrow, and you'll get to Ironforge. So I'm following this road, and now mind you, I'm level 15, I have to walk. I don't have travel form, there's no mount. Mounts at that point weren't until level 40, and epic mounts weren't until 60, so travel form was 30. So I was literally walking through the wetlands, I remember this, I aggroed a bunch of level 30-something crocodiles, died a bunch of times. And, excuse me, I got the hiccups. And when finally got to the end of Wetlands, I get to, like, this mountain pass, go through. Now I'm in Loch Modan. And it's like, wait, like, there's, like, a forest now? Like, it was so unbelievable to me how dense this game was, and how, not, when I say dense, I don't mean, I still mean that it's a very open world game. It's one of the biggest sandboxes in gaming, but it's huge. You know, like the environments are so varied, and it's just incredible to see the first time through. So I go through Loch Modan. I remember I get to Valley of Kings, which is the door to Searing Gorge that you need the special key from the Direhorn Kodo. That's a quest. I don't even know if it's still in the game, but it's pretty cool. And I'm at the gate, and I figure, oh, there's a huge-ass gate. This has to be the gate to the city. Ask in general chat, how do I get to Ironforge? Oh, you got to go through Dunmorrow, find the pass, and go through. Okay, find that pass, which is just right around the corner. Go through there, and I'm in this snowy, dwarven place. I'm like, holy shit, there's dwarves. Like, this is crazy. So I finally go up the path, and I see the huge gates of Ironforge, and I am blown away. Like, this is a gigantic city. Can't believe how big this is. Go inside. And it's incredible. There are hundreds of people in Ironforge. You got vendors for everything, weapons, armor, class trainers, everything. This is because Darnassus is such a small city, and it's so, even back in vanilla, it was so fragmented and all over the place, and finding anything was a nightmare. And Ironforge was just so well organized, and it was great to see, and it was just incredible. Like, you go to the Great Forge area, and you see the throne with the king, and the two big doors, one of them leading to Old Ironforge, which I definitely have a video of somewhere. And then it's just unbelievable. It's unbelievable for a new player, especially somebody who rolled a Night Elf and only knew of the Night Elf territories up until that point, to get to Ironforge and see all these different races and all these different classes in this crazy-looking city. So then I ask again in general chat, how do I get to Westfall? They say you have to take the tram to Stormwind. I'm like, okay, find the tram. And that's the first time I saw gnomes because of Tinkertown. That's the first time I saw a portal, because I don't think I had done any dungeons yet, because the only dungeon out there in Kalimdor at that level is like Black Fathom Depths, or Black Fathom Deeps, and that's like 30-something, I think, at the time. So, take the tram. It's like a subway. It's like sick. We got a subway in World of Warcraft. Awesome. I'm a New Yorker. This makes me feel at home. Go along the subway. I see the Loch Ness Monster. I'm like, what the fuck? What is this? What is this place? So go through the tram, arrive at the other end, get out. Here's Stormwind, this gigantic human capital. And mind you, I hadn't played the Warcraft series before, aside from a couple times at a friend's house, so I didn't know about this stuff. I didn't know that Stormwind was even a thing. Get out, human capital. It's unbelievable. It looks like Disney World. Like, just of like how like fantasy-esque it is. It's beautiful. I can't believe it. So then I ask in general chat, how do I get to Westfall? They say just exit and go to the west, and you're there. So get into Elwyn Forest, and I see the Defias cut purses outside. I'm like, wow, humanoid enemies. That's crazy. No more satyr and centaur and tigers and shit. Like, these are real enemies now. Get into Goldshire. I see my first bustling inn, because Goldshire was the place back then. It still is on RP servers, but not anymore. I head to the west. Then I get to Westfall, and it's beautiful. Yeah, sure. Like, now, looking back on it, I think it's beautiful. But even then, I think it's beautiful because, again, questing in a Night Elf zone, your whole color palette is purple, blue, green, and gray in Darkshore. And Darkshore is depressing. Like, questing in Darkshore as one of the first places you go can be really depressing because it's gray all the time. And everyone's dead. And, like, you're being told all these stories of, like, war and death. And you have that guy, Nico or Nicholas, and, like, you find his dead wife's spirit, and they, like, get married on the dock. It's so depressing. But now you're in Westfall, and it's, like, a little bit more cheery. You have Old Blanchy, and you go to Sentinel Hill, and you have Moonbrook and all these places. So I finally, go underwater, and I do the quest, and I go back to Moonglade. But at that point, I was like, I no longer want to quest in the Moonglade area. I want to go to Westfall. So that's where I did all my questing, was in Eastern Kingdoms. And I still do that to this day, no matter what class I play. So fast forward, I want to say till about, I want to say like April. That was January, February-ish when I started playing. I made it to level 30. I got Travel Form, and I explored a lot more. I remember going to Arathi Highlands and finding Stonefang Keep. What was that? Yeah, SFK. And parking right out there. I remember that was the last place I went on my druid. And then I remember working at the supermarket, and there were some kids in the dairy department who were a year older than me, I believe, or a year or two older than me, and they were talking about WoW. And I said, hey, like, you guys play WoW? Where do you play? Like, what server you on? Say, we're on Arthas. I'm like, okay, I have a character on this server. I seriously don't remember the name of the server. Could have been Eridar. I don't really know. But they said, if you want to roll on this server, you can come into the guild. And this is back when guilds were important. Like, if you belonged to a guild, you belonged to something. You were part of something in this community. So, I go home, I re-roll a new character. I roll a human warrior named Frigus, Frigus, and like I went from 1 through 30 on spring break. I dedicated the entire week to just grinding out this character. And I think I did it in like 10 days or something like that. So I get to 30, and then that's when my World of Warcraft experience really started. And that's where I met one of my best friends. I remember questing in Stranglethorn Vale, near one of the zombie troll areas in southern Stranglethorn, what is southern Stranglethorn now. And he was a paladin. His name was Judgmentian. And I remember he was riding his mount, or running through, and he gave me Blessing of Kings and waved at me, and then I realized we were in the same guild. So I hopped on Ventrilo, started talking to him. We are quite literally best friends to this day. WoW was amazing to me. We raided Molten Core and Onyxia and Zul'Gurub, and we got up to Blackwing Lair, and it was just incredible. It was absolutely incredible. It was one of my favorite experiences. And you can see behind me right there, I have the collector's editions. You can't see the vanilla one, but it's there. I have the collector's editions for all the versions of World of Warcraft right now, as well as a couple of the normal ones that are tucked away in there. I love this game. This game is so important to my life, and it always has been. I'm not subscribed right now for various reasons, which we'll get to, but WoW is very important to me, and Vanilla WoW was very important to me, and Wrath was very important to me. I skipped Burning Crusade because I had some college issues going on at the time. Wound up dropping out and selling my account, but so I missed Burning Crusade, came back in Wrath, but yeah, it's a very important part of my life, and every time Blizzard makes a decision towards this game, not that I take it personally, but it affects me because it affects what I think of World of Warcraft, and I wish that people were getting the same experiences that I did back in Vanilla now, and I know that's not happening because of the way the game is. The second discussion topic is the introduction of the Looking for Group tool, or Dungeon Finder, back in patch 3.3. Now, patch 3.3 was, I want to say, 2009. Let's double check. I'm really good with dates. Patch 3.3 was December 9, 2009. That's at least what it was on the World of Warcraft website right now. It was called Fall of the Lich King. It was when ICC, Ice Crown Citadel, first opened up, and they introduced Dungeon Finder, LFG, Group Finder, whatever you want to call it. And this was a cross-realm within your battle group. So something that a lot of people don't really know exists in WoW, something called a battle group. It's like a group of 5 or 6 servers, sometimes like 7 or 8. I know Arthas was part of the Ruin battle group, and when they introduced cross-realm dungeons and battlegrounds and all that, sorry, something in my eye, they would do it by battle groups. So they kind of link these 5 servers together, link the player pool of these 5 servers together, so when you would queue up for a dungeon or a battleground, instead of picking from the 5,000 people on one server, it would pick from the 25,000 people on 5 servers. So it drastically reduced queue times is what it did. And it was a great idea. It was a wonderful, wonderful idea. Now, what they did was they released the Dungeon Finder with the 3 new Ice Crown dungeons. Forge of Souls, Pit of Sauron, and Hall of Reflections. I'm doing this with no script, so if I talk in circles or talk very strangely, that's why. So those 3 dungeons were introduced with Dungeon Finder. Now, those 3 dungeons, if you did Forge of Souls, at the end of Forge of Souls, I think it was the Crucible, whatever the last boss was, you would kill the last boss, and there was a portal right at the end. You would walk through the portal and go to Pit of Sauron. At the end of Pit of Sauron, there was a portal. You would walk through the portal and go into the Halls of Reflection. So you could quite literally do these dungeons if you wanted to sit there for an hour and a half with your friends, back to back to back. And it was great. It was one of the best dungeon experiences ever. I still say to this day that the last patch of ICC, after all of Ice Crown Citadel was opened up, was the best World of Warcraft content in terms of immersion, storytelling, and difficulty. So, when they released Dungeon Finder, it seemed like a very good idea, and it was. It worked very well. We were able to grind up reputations very fast because you could wear a tabard and just grind through dungeons, and the dungeons were fun. I would say like 99% of the dungeons in Wrath of the Lich King were really good. I think Halls of Stone was the one that nobody liked. I thought it was okay, and maybe Violet Hold was kind of annoying, especially if you were an achievement hunter because the bosses were random every time. But anyway, so the key element to the Dungeon Finder tool was that it was introduced very late into the expansion cycle. It was actually part of the last big content patch, if you don't count Ruby Sanctum. Ruby Sanctum was only released because everybody was done with Icecrown Citadel for months, and we were just waiting for Cataclysm, so they gave us a quick dragon dungeon to raid. Now, people who had been playing up until that point had to use the summoning stones or even the meeting stones when in the very beginning they were used for like a queuing system or something like that. And we had to go to the dungeon in order to get into the dungeon. We couldn't just sit in the menu, queue up, and wait. So we already had the experience of not having this tool. And yes, I can understand some players may say, well, you know what, it made things easier. And sure, it absolutely made things easier. It made it much quicker to get into a dungeon. But it did something else. It began the demise of server communities. Now, it being released so late into the expansion made it so that if we just wanted to, we had already run these dungeons so many times already, but now we could do it for quick rep grinds or get badges to grind for Ice Crown gear. It had a purpose, but what was happening was that you would get into these dungeon groups with people on another server who you had no connection with, and in the beginning, it was still very communicative. Most people still wanted to talk because the dungeons were somewhat difficult. You couldn't stand in the fire, stuff like that. Explain new boss mechanics in case you hadn't done the dungeon before. Stuff like that. People were still communicating. Then, at the start of Cataclysm, in patch 4.0 or 4.01, whatever, they made it so you had to go to the dungeon entrance at least once before you were allowed to just queue from it. Now, imagine this. You've been playing World of Warcraft for 3+ years, right? Since Burning Crusade Vanilla. You have always had to go to a dungeon in order to get into a dungeon. You had to specifically walk into that portal. You've done the Maradon quests just to get the staff, so you could, only do princess runs. Sometimes you do orange wing runs, purple wing runs. You would specifically do these winged runs and then a princess run. You would have to go to Scarlet Monastery in order to choose whether or not to do Cathedral, Library, or Graveyard. Was there another one? Cathedral, Library, Graveyard. Yeah, I think that was it. Sorry. But you had to go to these places. You had to explore the world. Now, in patch 3.3, they give you Dungeon Finder, so in the late life of that expansion, you can just kind of do it easily, right? It's somewhat of it's easing the burden. Now, in Cataclysm, you have to go to the dungeon at least one time. But for the next year or two, the only way you are doing dungeons is by sitting in Stormwind or Ironforge or Orgrimmar or Undercity or whatever, pressing that I button, that I key, bringing up a menu, and hitting Find Group. You are not exploring the world. You are not out there. You are not building connections with the community. You may still have a guild, but, and if you're doing dungeons with your guildmates, that's great, but you're still just going into an interface menu and hitting Find Group. You could select a dungeon, but you're not exploring the world. And the level and world designers at Blizzard spend so much time creating these amazing worlds and these brand new continents every few years. And the story, the lore masters, I'm calling them lore masters. They could just be called story writers. I don't know. But, they're spending so much time crafting these stories and telling you about these people and these zones and these continents and these races, and they build up this rich history. And people aren't finding out about it because they're not exploring the world. They're not out there. They're just simply going into a menu and then being teleported somewhere else. So they're not exploring these worlds. And the community is diminishing. And that's something that we had in Vanilla and Burning Crusade and Wrath, was a community, because you had to be out there in the world. You had to make connections. You had to meet people. And that's why subscription numbers were constantly rising the whole time. Now, yeah, they did dip at the end of Wrath simply because there was no content left. After we all killed Arthas, it was done. We just had to wait for Cataclysm, and that's natural, right? That's always going to happen. So, but then in Cataclysm, the whole time, we never went to dungeon entrances. We stopped exploring the world. Once we completed the 5 zones of new content, which was amazing considering that they were within Azeroth itself, we didn't have to go to a new continent. Sure, I mean, Stonecore might have been, not Stonecore, Stonehearth, whatever the center of the world was, I always forget. That, I guess, could be considered like a new continent because it's disconnected from everything else, but man, it was just so nice. And they rebuilt the whole vanilla world. You know, they redid the 1 through 60 questing experience. But what they started doing was they got rid of group quests, and they got rid of mandatory group quests and, you know, elite mobs that you needed a group to take down. And they made the whole experience a solo experience. And that's bad. That's terrible. Because now you're going through these zones and going to zone to zone to zone by yourself. You have no need to make a connection. You have no need to ask for help. Nothing. You may ask where something is, but you're never going to say, hey, I need help killing, you know, Morbin Fell in Duskwood. You know, I need help, you know, killing the Hermit. I need help killing Stalvin Mismantle. I need help doing all these things. You never need it anymore. You just turn in the quest, get a new one, turn in the quest, get a new one, turn in the quest, get a new one. And they're so easy and so quick that you're never building a connection. You're not diving into the world as you once did. And I get it. I'm a lore hound. I read quest texts. I understand that I'm in the minority of this. But you can talk to just about any World of Warcraft player who is playing from Vanilla to Wrath, or even, you know, just a little bit less than that, playing before Cataclysm at least, and they will tell you that the world is a dense place and people wanted to make connections with each other. So, let's move on to our next point because we're in Cataclysm already. The third point I wanted to talk about was the introduction of Raid Finder in patch 4.3. This was very similar to the introduction of Dungeon Finder in 3.3, except now it was for raids, more specifically Dragon Soul. Dragon Soul has gone down as one of the worst, biggest letdowns of World of Warcraft raiding. Cataclysm's beginning, we had 3 raid dungeons. We had Bastion of Twilight, we had Blackwing Descent, and we had the Wind Dungeon. What the hell was it called? Throne of the Four Winds. So we had 3 raid dungeons to choose from. And that was great. I always like when they do that. They split up the content between dungeons. And each dungeon tells a really cool story. And they were great raids. I liked them a lot, actually. Especially as a healer. The Chimeron fight was a really cool one in Blackwing Descent. And Alakir was awesome because you get to fly. It was really sick. And we had Firelands. Some people didn't like Firelands. I happen to like it a lot. Some people thought that it was a little cheap because, you know, we just fought Ragnaros again. But I thought that the rest of the bosses were really cool. And there was a good amount of bosses in there. But then, after Firelands, we didn't get the underwater raid that we were promised. And we had to wait a little bit longer. And instead, we got Dragon Soul. And they attempted to do something very similar that they did with Ice Trance Citadel. Was in 4.3, they released 3 new dungeons, End Time, and a couple of others. I honestly forget because at this point I had stopped playing. And then they also released a new raid called Dragon Soul. Dragon Soul was the Deathwing dungeon, and this was when we were going to take down Deathwing, who was the nemesis all throughout Cataclysm. Deathwing would show up in random zones. I believe it was... No, it was actually all throughout Azeroth. I thought that it was just the new zones, but it was actually all throughout Azeroth. He would show up at random and just light the whole zone on fire. And you would die. Like, it was a forced death. They felt that what they did with Arthas was they made him kind of like ever-present. He was always around, but not enough. So they made Deathwing just show up at random and just burn the place down. And it was pretty sick. But when the Deathwing fight was first described to us, I believe it was at a BlizzCon or in some sort of interview, we were told that we would fly on Deathwing's back across Azeroth. And that sounds really sick. That sounds like one of the coolest things ever in my eyes. I was very excited for it. But during the PTR testing, turns out that all we were doing was like picking apart his armor on his back, basically scratching his back and fighting ads. And we weren't flying over Azeroth, we were flying over clouds. And that was a big letdown. I was really disappointed by that. And to me, that was the first big red flag that And this isn't to discredit anyone who works at Blizzard. I know everybody there works very hard, and they make a good game. But that was the first sign to me that they were losing their touch, because this felt like a cop-out fight. They built it up to be this big thing, but instead we're just scratching his back and flying over some clouds. We could be anywhere on Azeroth. We could not even be on Azeroth, and we wouldn't even know. It's just clouds, right? That's not fun. That's lazy. Now, you can make the argument that, well, maybe people's computers couldn't handle it if you were actually flying over zones. And that's fine. WoW has a reputation of being able to run on absolutely anything. At least it did for a long time. I don't know if that's still the case, but Blizzard's very good at optimizing to any sort of machine. But, I don't know. Pick a few zones, do one zone, then clouds, another zone, then clouds. Something. Don't just give me clouds. And then the second phase of the fight, or the final encounter, I guess, he's stuck in the maelstrom and you clip his nails. And again, it's just fighting ads. You're never actually fighting Deathwing. You're fighting ads the whole time. It's disappointing to say at the least. So, that happens. But they also introduced something called Raid Finder. And Raid Finder is essentially the same exact thing, but for raids. More specifically, just Dragon Soul for the end of Cataclysm. Now, it seemed like an okay idea. Their mission was to make it so people who couldn't raid, people who couldn't commit to raiding schedules and join a raiding guild, could still see the content, because all this content was being made, but a lot of people never saw it. And that's understandable. But, and I hate to be kind of an elitist here, but I don't think that's their problem, right? Like, sure, they make that content, but you're making that content for end game. You're making that content for people who want to put in the time to see it and want these difficult encounters. And they want that experience for themselves. They want that camaraderie. They want to do this with a guild. They want to do this with their friends. They don't want to sit in a city, press I, go to the raid tab, and hit find group. Because once again, that's taking people out of the world, it's breaking the connections, and it's trivializing content. There is no reason for me to join a raiding guild if I can just go to Raid Finder. Now, yeah, you can make the argument that, well, it's not the real encounter because the mechanics are watered down. Sure, but you know what? I'm seeing the content, I'm seeing the boss, I'm getting the story. What else is there? The challenge? That's not really a big deal to me at this point, because raid fights are never that challenging. Now, I'm not saying that to be like, oh, everything's so easy, it's just a walk in the park. No, of course they're hard and they take time, but the reason you're doing that is to, like, beat the boss, right? Like, the reason we were raiding Onyxia or Blackwing Lair or people who were raiding Nax or even, like, Icecrown Citadel, I wanted to take down the Lich King. I wanted to kill Arthas for what he had done. If that was part of Raid Finder, I don't think I would have cared. I really don't. Because Icecrown was such a huge dungeon. The boss encounters were so varied. And everything had, like, its own, like, identity. We spent weeks on Sindragosa. Weeks. And then we spent maybe 2 weeks on the Lich King. Sindragosa was a gatekeeper. She was a tough, tough dragon fight. But, yeah, I don't think that if it was part of a Raid Finder, I would have done it. And a lot of people felt this way. Now, the way that they alleviated that was that if you did Raid Finder, you got gear that looked a little bit different. But it didn't matter at that point because we had transmog. We had transmogrification. We can make any armor look like any armor. So it didn't even matter. Nothing. Transmog is a good idea, but it shouldn't have been introduced at the same time as Raid Finder, in my opinion. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the fourth point, which is we're going to talk about subscription numbers. Now, if we take a look at the MMO champion graph that was always getting updated with the new earnings calls from Blizzard, we're going to take at the very last one. We're going to take a look at the very last one. This was November, I believe it was November 2015. November 3rd, 2015. Blizzard today has stopped reporting subscription numbers. Now, if we take a look at the peak of Wrath of the Lich King in the very beginning of Cataclysm, there were 12 million global subscribers. And it never once... It dipped slightly from the beginning of Wrath. Oh, that was about even, actually. So it just sort of stayed even at 11.5. And then towards the end, I think this was about the time that they announced Cataclysm. People jumped into Wrath just to, like, catch up. Jumped to 12 million. So 12 million subscribers. and it consistently fell. Now, the launch of a new expansion, sure, that's always going to peak, right? But it fell from 12 million down to 9.1 at the end of Cataclysm, back up to 10 for Mists, fell all the way down to 6.8 towards the end, back up to 7.4 when Warlords was coming, all the way back up to 10 million when Warlords came out. Now it's down to 5.5 million. And to this day, this is May 2016, we don't know how low it is now. I would assume it's even lower considering that Hellfire Citadel has been out for quite some time. So, patch 3.3, we have 12 million subscribers, 11.5 since that was 2009. Patch 4.3, we have 9. And Dungeon Finder and Raid Finder have been part of World of Warcraft ever since they were released. So, in Cataclysm, in the very beginning, you had to go to the dungeon portals one time just to add it to your Dungeon Finder menu. You never had to go back after that. And I think by 4.2, they got rid of that requirement. So over time, we're seeing that the more they took away from world exploration and community building, the lower and lower their numbers dropped, all the way down to 5.5 million. Now, those are the major features introduced in each of these patches. And that's where the biggest drop-offs are, was the introduction of Dungeon Finder and Raid Finder. It's a serious correlation here. So what I think they should do going forward, and I'm not going to wrap it up yet. I still have a couple more things I don't talk about, but just to kind of put a bow on the Dungeon Finder, Raid Finder conversation, is I think that they should hold those features until the end of the expansion when it's time to catch up. I really think that they should do that. Make the world explorable, turn off cross-realm zones, which is something I don't even know when they released that in Cataclysm. And the goal of that was to make it so the lower population realms and the lower population realms, they would combine the zones themselves into sort of masked instances. You wouldn't ever go through a portal. But when you would step into Westfall, for example, you would then be in Westfall with the rest of your battle group just to kind of populate the world. And that was because that was sort of like putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. They were hemorrhaging subscribers at that point. So they were okay, let's just sort of make it seem more popular, right? It was a very strange thing to do instead of shutting down and merging servers, which is what they had done before. So yeah, once those features were introduced, subscriptions started falling because the community wasn't there. And I keep stressing the word community for a very specific reason. It's because that's what's important. Okay, so we're down to 5.5 million subscribers that we know of today. Let's move on to point number 5, the benefit of private servers. So, private servers have been around in World of Warcraft for years. Years and years and years and years. People want to play the content they played when this game first came out. They want to play vanilla content, they want to play Burning Crusade content, and they want to play Wrath of the Lich King content. But they don't just want to play that content because that content is still technically available in Warlords of Draenor. They want to play it as it was originally put out, because every time an expansion comes out, they more or less have the experience required to get from 70 to 80 or 80 to 90. This way people can catch up into the new content faster. But a lot of people don't like that because it makes their grind feel diminished because now new people don't have to go through the same grind. And I get that. But I also get it from Blizzard's perspective because, when somebody buys World of Warcraft today, there is a lot of content for them to do before they get to the new stuff. So they want to make it quicker. And I get it. I'm actually okay with it. I have no problem with that. But there are times where I want to play vanilla World of Warcraft. I want to see Western Plaguelands before the plague was cured. I want to see Eastern Plaguelands as it was originally. I want to see Light's Hope Chapel when it was just a fucking shack near some mountain, right? I don't want to see the Blight being, cleaned up. I want to see that shack with the Wyvern Master and the Griffin Master and, wondering what's underneath it, right? So Those servers are there for people who want to experience that, and they want to have that tight-knit community again. Because, yeah, sure, World of Warcraft may have had 11 million subscribers, but it was a tight-knit community. Plenty of people were in guilds that they cared about. I was in plenty of guilds that I cared about, and I led raids for a lot of guilds that I cared about. But the more features that they introduced, like Dungeon Finder and Group Finder and Raid Finder and Cross Realm Zones, the less of a point guild served. Because now you could just queue up for a dungeon. You never have to leave the city. You never have to go anywhere. You can just enter the dungeon, clear it out, and you're done. There's no point of having a guild unless you want to have like some hardcore mythic progression guild. And Blizzard has tried to do that a bunch of times, in a few different ways, I should say. They introduced mythic raiding and warlords, and this made it so this added like some level of difficulty that you couldn't do in Raid Finder. And sometimes there were like bosses locked behind it, but it didn't serve too much of a purpose because the real problem is the existence of Raid Finder. But anyway, so one of the other benefits is that, along with the community and people experiencing content as it was originally intended, is people like me, people who make content, doing these like vanilla glitch exploration videos. I did one on Dancing Troll Village recently, and I can't do that on a server today because it's been changed. I can't show that content. Like, it's not even locked away in a museum somewhere. It's just unavailable. And I have to use, not illegal, I guess it's illegal somewhat, but I have to use some workaround joining some random server, although Nostalrius was really nice. But when I had to do Dancing Troll Village, I had to find some private server that I really didn't like because I wanted to do a Hyjal exploration video, but the server that I was on was a Burning Crusade server, and Hyjal's exploration method was patched out in Burning Crusade, so I can't do it anymore. And that was the benefit of Nostalrius, was that it was 1.12, or version 1.12, so the glitch was still there. Now, people today don't know what it was like raiding Molten Core. They don't know what it was like raiding Blackwing Depths. Blackwing Depths. Was it Blackwing BWD? No, that was the new one. Blackwing Lair, I should say. I'm sorry. Blackwing Descent was the one I was thinking of. And certainly don't know what it was like raiding Nax when it was originally intended. And I understand that. And people want to know what it was like. They want to know the difficulty that World of Warcraft was. And yeah, there were a lot of weird rotations. There were a lot of weird builds on rogues and priests and warlocks, and even stranger stuff on like paladins, and like paladins were just buffing machines. They did nothing else. They barely even healed. Healing was for druids and priests. Paladins were simply just seal twisting and just buffing people for 30 seconds at a time, and it was insane. And you had 40 people downing bosses and downing lava giants and, Draconoid fucking humanoid things in Blackwing Lair, and Patchwork and the Four Horsemen, and so many other bosses. And it was exciting. It was a really exciting thing to be doing with 39 of your friends who you have been grinding with for months. It forms a bond with people. I still talk to old guildmates that I was doing ICC with and vanilla content with, and that just doesn't exist in World of Warcraft anymore. And Blizzard hasn't shown any earnest intention, I feel, to rectifying that. And I think that's a major problem. And the whole Nostalrius thing really... It was always known that private servers existed, and it was always known that Blizzard was shutting down private servers, but the shutdown of Nostalrius was sort of something that... It was almost like Blizzard attempted to suture the wound, but then it just fought back and blew up. And that's when we're going to get into point 6, Blizzard's stubbornness. Now, Blizzard, whenever they would shut down a private server, they really wouldn't say much about it. They would just send them a C&D, and that would be it. Now, private servers never really had huge populations, certainly not on the scale of Nostalrius, and I'm actually not too sure what took them so long to shut down Nostalrius, because Nostalrius was around for a while. And what these servers do is they install World of Warcraft, out of a box, and then that installs plenty of content onto your computer, but what it's missing is the AI scripting, especially in dungeons. And what AI scripting is when you get a boss down to 20%, he does something else. That's scripting, because there's something on the server side that has to tell the game to add this mechanic to the boss fight, or take this mechanic away, or make him berserk, or have him cast this spell. That's scripting. There were people on these private servers that spent their time, volunteer time, scripting these fights, redoing Blizzard's work from 10 years ago. Because Blizzard won't release some sort of legacy server. These people are not in it for the money. Sure, there are a few private servers out there that you can donate to and get weapons or items or something. I'm not too keen on those for obvious reasons. But Nostarius was not one of those. They didn't take donations. They were not paid. They were simply doing it for the love of the game. And I get Blizzard's business side argument of, this is our property. You have no right to tamper with it. You can't set up your own servers. This is part of the EULA. You're directly violating our license agreement. We have to shut it down. But I feel like that's a cop-out, right? Because World of Warcraft has been hemorrhaging subscribers for the past, 5 years since Cataclysm came out. They've just been dropping like flies. And yet, servers like Nostarius, or just Nostarius, I should say, has over 100,000 active accounts, even more. What are the real numbers? The owners of Nostarius' 150,000 active user accounts took the news hard in their support for the popular server. 150,000 active accounts on one private server that is unlicensed, barely advertised. Imagine if Blizzard just released a legacy server with Vanilla or Burning Crusade or Wrath or Cataclysm or even Mist. Like, there are plenty of people who just want to go play Mists, right? Like, people love different things, different eras of World of Warcraft. I would wager a guess to say WoW is currently under 5 million subscribers, which is somewhere they haven't been since midway through Vanilla, I think. I think when Burning Crusade came out, they were up to like 7 or 8. 8 million, rather. I'm so good with these numbers. 8 million at the end of Vanilla, and 8.5 at the beginning of Burning Crusade. And they're lower than that. They were at 3.5 million midway through 2005. And that was before Naxxramas. I think Naxxramas was like August or July of 2006. But anyway. I'm not the only one to say this. Plenty of people have said this. They should just release it, because what do they stand to lose exactly? Okay, their reasoning is that they need to get old hardware to run this. I think that's bullshit. I'm going to call straight up bullshit on that. Because what was Nostarius running on? I don't personally know, but I'd find it hard to believe that they got some server from 2005 running some form. I mean, they could be using like Windows XP Server. That wouldn't surprise me, because plenty of places still run Windows XP Server, or even Windows NT. Like, what's the big deal? You have all these servers with no subscribers on it. Repurpose some of them. Like, merge some servers, take the blades, repurpose them, have them do something else. But yeah, they stand to lose nothing. Another thing that Blizzard has said is that, we want to focus on new content. Well, clearly your new content isn't working, right? Warlords of Draenor was a really good idea, but the lore was a bit of a cop-out. I get that it had to lead to the Burning Legion fight. That's fine. I'm very much okay with that. But Garrosh should have just died at the end of Mists of Pandaria. He shouldn't have been, tricked by that Bronze Drake guy. I forget his name. Gone to some alternate reality, which is simply just a plea for fans to come back to the game. Because at that point, they were between 6 million? Yeah, 6.8 at the end of Mists. A point they hadn't been since Vanilla, again. It was just like a plea to get fans to come back. And I thought it was a pretty cool idea. Experience Outland before it was Outland. That's a cool thing. I'm on board with that. But to make it like some alternate timeline is so stupid. That just never works. And I'm sort of excited for Legion. I'll play it. I'll buy it simply because I need to add to that beautiful shelf of awesome collector's editions. Some of my favorite collector's editions are World of Warcraft collector's editions. And I need to complete the set. But I'm going to complete the questing content and unsubscribe. I doubt I'll raid because I don't like doing Raid Finder. I never have. I never will. I think it's a cheap experience. And I personally don't have the time to join a raiding guild anymore. But they stand to lose nothing because people want this content. You have people telling you, there was just a petition of over 100,000 people signed it. 200,000. Over 200,000 people signed this petition to bring back legacy servers. And here we go. 258,259 signatures on this petition sent to Blizzard saying, we will pay you for this content. That's 258,000 more subscribers than you currently have. I can guarantee you that. And this was advertised on Reddit and a few gaming websites. Imagine if Blizzard announced one day, hey, you want to play vanilla World of Warcraft? You want to play the Burning Crusade? You want to play Wrath of the Lich King? $10 a month. Come back. If you have the game installed, fine. You have the files. Good to go. Or they could get away with triple dipping or quadruple dipping. They could so easily get away with that and release a box that says World of Warcraft Classic. Choose from your favorite expansion. And then when you install that, it gives you a new server list of which one you want to play. Come on. I would buy that. I would fucking buy that easily. If not to just add to the shelf. But who knows if they'll do it. Nostarius apparently had to sit down with them. We don't know exactly how it went. They seem to be in good spirits, but we don't know. So that brings me to my seventh and final point, is vanilla servers today, or legacy servers today. When I recorded that Dancing Troll Village, I joined a realm. I always look for realms that have an instant 60, or in this case, an instant 70, meaning that once you create your account, it's level 70. There's no grind required. I do that simply so I can record some sort of video. When I was on Nostarius, however, that was not... I think there was a free 60 server, but you started at level 1, you could talk to an NPC and get to 60. I think that's the way it works. Correct me if I'm wrong. It was a long time since I played on Nostarius, obviously. But a lot of these servers do really weird things. One of the servers that I had joined was a vanilla server, and it's still around, but they repurposed Hyjal, the zone that was always locked off until Cataclysm. And that was one of my favorite zones to glitch into because it was a completed zone landscape-wise. There was just nothing in it, except for an under construction design from Blizzard. It had a completely different looking world tree. It had Onyxia's lair. It had some really cool stuff in it, and I love showing people that. Unfortunately, I can't record a video with that because the only private servers are either Burning Crusade servers, in which the path has been patched out, or this particular vanilla server where they repurposed it, and it's now like a grinding zone for materials. They just added some random mobs all over the place, and you have to teleport in. You can glitch in, but once you get to that spot, there's mobs where there shouldn't be, so I don't really like it. They still exist, and they're still around. The beauty of Nostarius, though, is that it was almost completely re-scripted. And people liked that. That meant that they could raid and have the same, more or less, experience they did back in 2004, 5, and 6, and get what they came for. And the current offering of private servers don't really have that. So without Nostarius, it's going to be a really long time until we get something like that again. And then it just faces the same fate of being shut down by Blizzard. So I feel like the only good move for Blizzard right now is to say, we are developing legacy servers, expect them sometime next year. MMOs are sort of going out. Every 10 years, a video game genre gets phased out. We saw it happen with platformers. After the N64 PlayStation 1 era, they sort of went away. Yeah, don't get me wrong, we had stuff like Shadow of the Colossus and Ico and Jak and Daxter and Ratchet and Clank, and that's fine. But what I mean is they're not as proliferated as they used to be. There was a platformer coming out every month back in the day. Now it's we have Super Mario. I'm looking at my shelf in the reflection here. Super Mario Maker, which is, it's a level building game. It's a platformer. There's Super Mario 3D World, New Super Mario Bros. U. That's just on Nintendo. But that's across the entire lifespan of the Wii U. That's kind of all we got. Yeah. And MMOs are headed in that direction. They're going out. Final Fantasy XIV is doing really well. A Realm Reborn, I should say. The first iteration of 14 was pretty bad. 14 is doing really well, though. It still does not touch World of Warcraft's old numbers. I don't think it ever will. But it's doing well. And their content patches are amazing. And that game has a good grind, has a very good community. And I know people who start playing it every day. Not every day, but every once in a while people start playing. And I don't even think the story of that game is that good. Imagine if the story of that game was unbelievable as it is in Warcraft. You know, I used to read the Warcraft books. That's how into this game I was and how important it was to me. But, you know, so the current state of private servers right now, it's slim pickings. A lot of them are not scripted. Communities are very low. The raids really aren't accessible, very buggy. And that's Blizzard's other excuses, that you'd have all these bugs again. And it's like, the game wasn't that buggy. The only serious bug I can think of was the unkillable mob in Searing Gorge. It was like a lizard in a cave that I used to use to grind up weapon skill points. And the loot bug that's still around, where you go to loot something, but you're forever stuck in the loot position, and you can't attack anything, and you can't even loot the mob. And when you go to log off, it tells you an action is already in progress. You have to Alt F4 the game. Wow, big deal. Huge bug. Come on. So, yeah, those are my 7 talking points on this whole vanilla server topic and current state of WoW to me. I will play Legion. I mean, I have that thoughts video up on my other channel. But I'm pretty much just going to get through the 5 zones and then be done with it, you know? I'll do the dungeons, I guess, once or twice, but I don't see myself playing it for more than a couple of months, and then unsubscribing again. And I have a feeling that's going to be the feeling across the board for Legion. And WoW probably has like 2 expansions max left, I think. If we go to Argus, the Burning Legion homeworld, in the next expansion, that's probably going to be the end. Hopefully they release these vanilla servers before that, but who knows. Yeah, so this video went a lot longer. It's almost an hour. Oh my god, I gotta try to cut this down. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just leave it. There's a couple things that I always have to cut out, but yeah, so if you like this video, let's discuss it in the comments. I love talking about WoW, even in the bad state that it's in right now. I still want to talk about this. I still want to know what you guys think. So yeah, leave some comments, let me know. I'll be glad to join in the discussion. Be sure to subscribe to my new channel. Which is this one. It's not new, but you know, this is one that I'm going to be uploading to from now on. YouTube.com/SweetJohnnyCage. Also, check out my new website, SweetJohnnyCage.com. This is going to be where I archive all of my content that I've created over the years, including the new stuff. So stuff that I did at Video Game Central, stuff that I did at SJ Cage Productions, which is my other channel, stuff that I did for Job Squad Media, all the Dark Souls 3 content that I did, and everything that's all around the internet. Yeah, I'll be putting there as well as some stuff that I'm going to write eventually. Also subscribe to me not subscribe to me, but follow me on Twitch. I'm going to be updating my stream schedule every Monday. You can go there, follow me on Twitter at SJCage, and all that. Yeah, I think that's it. As always, I'm Sweet Johnny Cage. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.